Hi, my name's Nate, and today we're going to be diving into why Samuel Finley Breeze Morse was the most important person of all time. Now, who is Samuel Morse? Well, he is most commonly known as an inventor, but what a lot of people don't know is he was actually an artist too. Now, a young Samuel Morse would first go on to study at Phillips Academy in Massachusetts, but then later in life, he would attend Yale. Now, while at Yale, Samuel took various courses, but he really only found interest in lectures about electricity and its meaning and what it does. But he was pretty content with just selling his artwork and making a living that way. Now, while at Yale, Sam painted one of his most famous artworks, Dying Hercules. This caused Sam to want to study art more and become a great artist. So, him and his friend Washington Allston decided to head over to England and study at the Royal Academy. And now, after 3 years at the academy, Sam came home. And that's whenever he met the love of his life, Lucretia Walker. He fell in love instantly, and in their brief union, they had 3 children. Morse would soon find out that his large paintings were great attractions, but they just weren't paying the bills. This caused him to have to move around a lot, looking for work. And a lot of his work was in England, where he'd be separated from his wife. Now, in February of 1825, Sam was in England working on one of his paintings, while Lucy was preparing to give birth to their 3rd child, and she fell deathly ill. When Sam first heard of this, he got the first ticket he could and was on his way back to America. By the time he got there, he had found out that she was already dead and was buried. He didn't even get to say goodbye. This caused Sam to go into a great state of depression, and to make matters worse, his father and mother died in the next years coming. Now this answers the why of Samuel Morse. He was in a state of great depression, didn't know what to do with his life, and just mad at the world for not being able to say goodbye to his beloved wife. Whenever he got the idea, what if I could have got the message earlier that my wife was sick and dying instead of waiting 2 weeks to get a letter through the slow ships moving from America to England? What if there was a way where I could have instantly got the message that she was sick and been home on time to say goodbye to her and tell her I love her? After a while of grieving, Morse thought it would be best to go to Europe and try to recover from his depression. During his time in Europe, Morse would find out about the semaphore telegraph system, which was composed of men that stood 15 miles apart on a platform, each signaling a wooden code to each other to transfer a message fast. In 1832, on a boat ride back home to America, Charles Thomas Jackson and Morse would get into a discussion about the semaphore telegraph and how it could maybe be improved. This was whenever they recalled the idea that an electrical impulse could be carried very far in almost an instant using a wire, and this could possibly improve the semaphore telegraph. Now, how did Samuel Morse solve the problem of instant communication? Well, he knew that a spark could travel from one end of a wire to another almost instantly. But this was only one variable, and that's whenever he came up with the other 2. The second one would be the sparks absent, and the third one would be the distance between sparks. This helped them come up with the idea of different spark patterns, and distances would mean different variables or letters. Now, when and where did Morse show off his invention? Well, in the fall of 1837, Morse was teaching at the University of New York. Here is where he invited a whole bunch of wealthy businessmen to see if they would invest in his project, because Morse was out of money. He put all of his time and effort into the telegraph. Upon showing the businessmen, they were pretty impressed, but they just didn't see the need for instant communication at the time. I mean, they had mail, what was so important that needed to be transferred almost instantly. Not only that, but one of their main arguments was, if I want to communicate a letter to someone else, they also have to have a telegraph, and we're going to have a wire directly connected to each other. They couldn't see the point in that. To be completely honest, at this point, Morse was almost defeated. I mean, he put all of his time and money into this project, and no one seemed interested in it until one man came up to him, Alfred Vail, and they started talking. Now, Alfred was a very rich man, but he didn't make his own money. His father was very rich and owned a brass and ironworks factory. This worked out great because this was pretty much all the materials that Morse needed in his telegraph. So, Morse and Alfred's father made a deal for one-fourth equity in the telegraph. Now Morse needed to improve on his telegraph. So with the help of many of his friends, such as Leonard Gale and Joseph Henry, they invented the first American electromagnetic telegraph. In 1844, Sam got his first government funding from a governor in Maine to put a telegraph between Baltimore and Washington, D.C. This went successful, with his first words being, "What hath God wrought?" It's important to note that in 1844, Morse also filed for a patent for his invention for the telegraph. But with a lengthy court battle, it wasn't finally granted until 1849. Here, Morse just pretty much spent the rest of his life painting and donating his large sums of money to Yale and different colleges and a lot of younger artists' work that he appreciated. Samuel Morse was born on April 27th, 1791, and died of pneumonia on April 2nd, 1872. Now, this video has been going on for a while now, but still, why is Samuel Morse the most important person of all time? Well, think about his ideology and his reasons for inventing the telegraph. He was driven to do this with his hard work, and he really did put a lot of work and time into this invention. And think about if someone else could have came up with the first telegraph, or it would have definitely been different than Morse's. And if this would have failed, 10 years down the line, people might be using his invention, and then it fails, like it became relied upon, and it fails, it causes catastrophe, there's no communication, everyone's breaking down, they have to go back, then it just might not have got picked up ever again. And we could have still be using mail to talk to our friends to this day. Now, how did Morse change the course of history? What did he do that changed how I live today? Well, think about back at that time. If you wanted to get a message from England to Georgia, that would have taken weeks. Even with ships going back and forth every day, it still would have taken a lot of time, and it wasn't even guaranteed to really get there. It was unreliable. And what Morse did really was find out the power of electricity, what it could do. At the time, electricity was kind of this new concept. There wasn't really much known about it. But with him, people really started to see, oh my gosh, you can send a message from Europe the whole way to Washington, D.C. in, almost instantly. And this really amazed a lot of people and might have inspired later inventors to look into what electricity could do for them in the world. Without him, we might not have computers. It could be a completely different life that we have today. Electricity might have just been something today that turns on our light bulbs and nothing more than that. That is how we changed the course of history. Now, in summary, what Samuel Finley Breeze Morse did was solve the equation of long-distance communication and how it's done. And he changed the course of history forever and how we would communicate to this day. Thank you for your time. Now, Morse would soon find out that his large bills were great paintings, but just weren't. How did he solve the problem of instant communication? How did he solve the problem of instant communication? Now, how did Morse solve the communication of an instant problem